Not everybody with gluteal tendinopathy has to fully stop running when they're injured, but most runners do have to adjust what they do in their training sessions to allow the tendon to be able to recover while they still train. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand how you can judge what is right for you, whether you can continue running, whether you need to stop for a little bit, how to use the pain and symptoms you feel during as well as after a run to judge whether the session intensity was correct, what elements of your run you can adjust to help your tendon better cope, and also what elements of your running style you can play with to make it easier for your tendon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maryke. I'm one of the physiotherapists from sportsinjuryphysio.com, where you get online physiotherapy assessment as well as treatment of any type of sports injury, all done via video call. We do specialize in tendon injuries, so if you want to know more about our video call service, have a look at the description of this video. I'll put a link to the website there. To answer the question of whether you can continue to run, it's useful to just take a quick look at what actually happens in the tendon when you have gluteal tendinopathy. Gluteal tendinopathy is an overuse injury, so it means you've worked your gluteal tendons too hard for what they could cope with in that moment, or they didn't get enough recovery time after hard workouts or activities, and then they became injured. Of course, things like the menopause can predispose you to that because it affects how well your tendons can recover. But now that it's injured, it's lost a little bit of its strength and it's become super sensitive. And it's important to also remember that it can be very sensitive and actually quite strong still. Just because it's very painful doesn't mean you've got a weak tendon, so don't worry about that. But we do have to respect the sensitivity as well as the strength throughout the rehab process and our runs, because if we push either past its limit, the pain will just continue, and there's no use in having a strong tendon that's really, really painful still. The key to recovery lies in getting your workload that you put through that tendon day to day, but also in a week, to a level that actually matches the tendon's current capacity for work and things you want to be doing. So we're thinking the time you're standing, walking, your rehab exercises, if you want to do running, all of that together has to not exceed what your tendon can tolerate at the moment. So how can you judge what it can do at the moment? Well, one way to do that is that we can use the symptoms. You want to figure out, first of all, what is my baseline level of symptoms at the moment? So if I don't do anything specifically to really work the tendon hard, so I don't have a long day on my feet or do a lot of strong exercise or go for a run, I take things easy. What is my base level of pain? If you want to know if your run sessions are okay at the moment, you want to observe what happens during your run as well as in the hours after the run to your base level of discomfort. And usually a run is okay if you can honestly say that it was just a little bit uncomfortable or niggly around your base level while you were exercising. And then it's okay if it becomes a bit more sensitive than what it would normally be in the 24 or 48 hours afterwards, but not very uncomfortable. So for instance, if you wake up that evening, you think, oh man, my hip is really uncomfortable now, I'm struggling to sleep. Or the next day you wake up and the whole day it's a lot more uncomfortable than what it would normally be. That's an indication that likely whatever you did yesterday was a bit too much. But don't just look at the run session. It may also be that you spent a lot of time on your feet in general in that day, or did a lot of stairs, or did your rehab exercises plus your run. So it's the total load you've got to look at. It can be useful to think of the capacity of the tendon as a bucket of water. And there's only so much water to dish out throughout the week. So if I use a lot of my water from my bucket today, I have to take things easier tomorrow to get the bucket to fill up a bit again. When you're recovering from an injury, you don't want to push that bucket to the extreme level that it can take. You always want to kind of just strain it a little bit, take a bit of the water out, and then put a lot back in again. With rehab, it's always good if you really, really make double sure that your recovery is there. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that I have found in the past, even when somebody follows these guidelines absolutely perfectly, the pain can sometimes just continue. And in those cases, if you look at the whole training plan, and your gut feeling is saying that maybe I should just stop running for a little bit and focus on rehab, that is usually the right decision to take. So if you feel a bit stuck and you feel that the base level of pain is just not improving and you have been running throughout it, it can be useful to actually just take 4 weeks off running, switch to cross training. We've got videos about that, and really focus on your rehab, and then ease back in slowly after that and see how it reacts. So please remember that even if you do things perfectly, the body doesn't always react like it's supposed to according to the book. Some of the elements you can play with in your training sessions to find the right volume or intensity of running are quite obvious, but others are not even related to running. So let's look at them all. The first one is quite obvious. It's how far you run or the distance you run, because obviously the further you run, the more likely the glutes are to get tired and reach their capacity. Also think of the terrain, because the same distance run over a more hilly terrain will make the glutes work a lot harder than if you just stick to a flat, even terrain. Speed also influences it, because the faster you run, the harder the glutes have to work. The only thing to keep in mind here is there tend to be a tipping point. If you try to run too slowly, sometimes your running form can go. And then because your running form goes, you can actually place more strain on your glutes. So you're looking for a pace that feels comfortable and doesn't feel fast, but still allows you good running form and a good cadence. But we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Then there are 3 elements I want you to think about that kind of work together. It's how often you run, recovery time, and time on feet. Often when you're recovering from gluteal tendinopathy, it can be really, really useful if you dramatically reduce the number of runs you do in a week. So if you're somebody who normally runs 5 to 6 times a week, cutting it down to 2 or 3 times a week can be very useful, because that then allows recovery time to also do your rehab exercises, because you want to think about total time on feet as well and total load on the tendons, not just your running load. And you have to allow enough capacity for your rehab as well as the other times you've got to spend on your feet as well as your running in your week. So think about how often you run in the week and start with lower rather than more to get your baseline, and then you can build from there. And also in your recovery days, think of how much time you're actually spending on your feet, because it's not going to be a recovery day for your glute tendons if you go for a long shopping spree and spend hours on your feet, or you have to move your house and move up and down. That's not a recovery day for your glutes. So you have to think of what you actually do in your recovery days and whether your glutes are getting enough recovery time. And then lastly, there may be some adjustments you can do to your running form to also help your glutes. But running form is usually the last thing we mess with, because the research has shown that we all naturally choose a running style that's most beneficial for us and uses the least energy. But there are certain things that could be an issue if you really overdo them. And when it comes to correcting running style, it's important to understand that we're not looking for a perfect running style. That does not exist. And if you do find you're doing something like crossing your legs over too far, I'll demonstrate it all in a minute. It's not about making large corrections, because your body won't be used to it and you won't be able to cope with that. Even just a small adjustment is usually enough to make a difference. So let's look at the different elements that could be worth observing there. The first one is if you run with a very narrow gait, we call it tightrope running, that you don't have much space between your legs and you cross them over as if you're running on a line. That can put a bit more strain on the gluteal tendons as they come around then. So if you find that you're kicking your ankles, or somebody films you from the back or looks at you from the back and you don't see any gap between the legs when you place your feet, it might mean that you're actually putting your feet too close together. I also find just observing what you feel and what you do when you run already answers that question. If it is you, then don't try and bring it too far apart. You only need a little bit further apart to make a difference to start with. So just focus on, okay, I don't want to run in a tightrope. I just want my legs a little bit further apart. For me, I also found thinking about bringing my legs through straight as I run and not allowing them to twist in the air helped to not kick and help me place my leg in a better position. So observe all of those elements together. That feeds into the next one, where if when you take your weight on the leg, your leg turns in excessively, that will strain the glute tendons more. And again, it's normal to have some leg turn in as you run, but only a little bit. If it feels like it really swings in, then that's likely excessive. So you're not going to try and run with it not turning in at all, because then you'll end up perhaps turning it out too much, and that's a problem. You just want to, if you feel it swings into there every time, just say, well, just swing to there. Just reduce how far it swings. But I'll give you a cheat code in a minute that will help you correct these things more easily. Then also, if your hip drops dramatically when you run, we all get a little bit of a hip drop, but if it's too much, then it can cause trouble. This, in my experience, is a difficult one to control at this point. And it's not one that I would try and fix without actually doing rehab exercises to help me gain the control. So there are things like balancing exercises and little squats and stuff that can teach you that control, but they're only appropriate for later on in gluteal tendinopathy rehab. If you do them too early, they can actually flare you up. Your physio will help you introduce exercises like those in any case throughout your rehab, and you can then translate them back to your running as well. But there's a very good cheat code for all of this, where if you do this one thing, it can actually improve all of those elements. And this is, if you find that you're overstriding when you run. And overstriding means you're placing your leg far out in front of you, making contact with the floor, heel first, with every step you give. What that does is that creates quite a large braking force through the leg, which increases the strain on all the elements. If you find that you're overstriding and you bring your leg just a bit closer to your midline, that you land closer to your body, you're leaning forwards and landing more underneath you, that reduces the braking force. And the research shows that that is the most effective way to actually reduce the inward swing of the leg, the drop of the pelvis, and all of the issues that can irritate the gluteal tendons. So if you don't want to get too technical about what I do with my legs when I run, and you find you're overstriding, just think about, instead of placing your foot far out in front of you, think about leaning forwards with your whole body a little bit and trying to make contact closer to underneath you, which will mean you're going to give shorter strides, slightly faster strides, but not have that large braking force. Do not try and change to running on your forefoot if you're a natural heel striker. It's not the heel striking that's the problem. It's placing your foot so far out in front of you. So you figured out now that, yeah, you can continue running. There's a session that you can do that doesn't push your pain up above that level. But how do you know if you can go for your run today, whether your tendon has recovered enough from the training and activities from the previous days? Well, the obvious thing is, if you're just moving around and feels uncomfortable more than usual, it's likely not the day to run. But if it feels absolutely fine, it can still be sneaky that it's not fully recovered. And there's a way that you can test that. It's not foolproof, but I find it quite useful and have found it useful for myself when I've had tendon injuries in the past. And that is, if you can do an isometric contraction where you contract the muscle that attaches to that tendon strongly. So isometric just means that you're pushing against something that doesn't allow movement, but it tenses the muscle quite strongly. Then you can judge the sensitivity, whether it says that it's ready for run or not. And you obviously also want to know the baseline of this contraction, what you would normally feel if your tendon was recovered, to be able to judge what it feels like today. So to give you an example for the gluteal tendons, an isometric contraction would be either standing upright, pushing out against a wall to the side, or pushing out against a strong resistance band, or doing a side plank on your knees, or even a full side plank. The movement you choose has to be equal to the capacity your tendon has at the moment. And your physio can help establish that during your rehab, and your rehab exercises will also help you understand what is the right capacity for you or the right test for you. Now, when you do this, you want to test it on days that you know your tendon is recovered, and just observe what you feel in your tendon. A normal tendon or one that is properly recovered will just be a little bit uncomfortable. You're aware of the area maybe, but it doesn't cause you trouble. if you now do that contraction shortly before you go for your run as part of your warm-up, and you think, oh, that's significantly more uncomfortable than what it normally is, that's a sign that the tendon is likely not fully recovered from whatever training you did the previous day or the days before. And you've got a choice then. You can either do the session as you were planning, which is likely not a good idea because it may just overwork it, or you can decide to do a significantly easier session than what was planned, which can work, but in the past I've found not that useful because I just then stress the whole time through the session that I'm making a mistake and got to put myself back. So I don't really get the mental or physical benefit to the full extent. The best option is to postpone it by another day, because that then will mean that actually you can feel more confident during the session and you can actually push to the level that you had planned for that day. So that isometric test is not a foolproof test, but it is one way that you can know whether your tendon is likely ready for today's run or it's best to postpone it by another day. Brilliant. Hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, just ask them in the comments. And if you need more help with your injury, you're welcome to consult one of the team via video call. The link to the website is in the description of this video. Take care.